friend from the see the first time. Want to trust in them. Love me, why you get anything you like? Long as you are right, then you are right. You and your man, that's why.
And we can close the door behind you.
Your voice, your music.
Our dreams are short, short. Make race in one path. Make me in the eyes, me in the eyes. Me love your life. Me treat it high.
Well, we needed a room to be like this temperature. It wasn't.
I know. I know.
You're listening to WGHC 98.3 FM. Your voice, your music, your station, WGHC 98.3 FM.
I am Mazi KK Odeluga, Mazi Ejikebe Obasi, and Mazi Oke Okachuku.
So
this is
you want to be specific and let people know, like this is an Igbo show.
Coming to you from WGHC,
Because a lot of times people come on there and
your
tell them,
voice,
like,
your
you can all
music,
listen because
your
it's in
station.
English.
Listen to us this and every Saturday at 4 to 5 p.m. US Central, and this and every Tuesday at 9 to 10 p.m. US Central.
Good afternoon, viewers. This is Straight Talk Radio, the world as we see it from an Igbo perspective. This is a regular feature on Saturdays at 4 p.m. As many of you listeners know, this is an Igbo radio show, but we talk about the world primarily from the Igbo perspective. And since it's mostly in English, I'm sure many of the listeners who are non-Igbo can follow along nicely. This program is usually held Saturdays between 4 and 5 p.m. and on Tuesdays between 9 and 10 p.m. On Saturdays, we talk about all things African, again, from an Igbo perspective. My co-hosts, Mazi Odeluga and Mazi Okachuku, are on their way Chicago traffic. This is construction season, but I'm sure they will join us soon enough. Today, we have a lot to talk about. Actually, we were hoping to play an interview with the chairperson of the African Development Bank, who was recently in the Chicagoland area and had a lot to talk about. We did interview him briefly, and he had a lot to talk about putting development money in the hands of Africans, African Americans, basically us owning our own thing. So hopefully that will come on sometime later. But I want to start by discussing something that's on the news in Nigeria quite a lot, but again, happened again very recently. This is the violence in the Middle Belt region, or what is known as the Middle Belt region, which is the central area of Nigeria. Over the past few years, this has been a hotbed of ethno-religious violence that has somehow been impossible to quell. And a few days ago, there was another mass killing in Jos, Plateau State, which is actually the epicenter of where these violent clashes have been occurring. And the reason we wanted to start with this is that it is exactly 53 years today from the time of extreme violence in this same city, as one of the cities in northern Nigeria where there was large-scale killing of Nigerians that lived or that come from the south, specifically what is known today as the southeast and the south-south. And those quote-unquote uprisings were witnessed by a lot of foreigners living in northern Nigeria at that time, including a group of missionaries from the United States of America, some of whom lived in Jos and were running a school known as the Hillcrest Secondary School in Jos. They left at the beginning of the Civil War and went back to the United States, but they were haunted by images of what they witnessed and the inability at that time of the government of Nigeria to intervene in any reasonable manner to stop widespread killing. This led them to create a video that they called The Disturbances, which we have actually aired on this, we've talked about on this show previously. It is interesting that 52 years later, this same city, Jos, is witnessing exactly the same kind of widespread, callous destruction of life and property, again with little or no effective intervention by the security services of the country, Nigeria. We have posted the video on our website so that we posted the video on our website so that anybody who wishes to can go there and watch this video. You know, I don't want to say anything about the video because I think it is self-explanatory. Watch this video that was made not by Nigerians 53 years ago. Look at what is happening in this same city, Jos, today, and draw your own conclusions. I am happy to announce that my co-hosts, Maazi Oke Okachukwu and Maazi Keke Udaloga, have joined me. Ndewono. Please say hi.
Ndewono.
There we go. So yes, so I would like to begin maybe by talking a little bit about this violence that is occurring in the middle belt of Nigeria and why it seems to be impossible to control. So, Maazi Okachukwu, you have...
Well, I think when we talked on Tuesday, we talked about history repeating itself and how the U.S. didn't learn the lessons of 1982 and we're repeating it now. And I would say the same thing is happening in Nigeria where we have not learned the lessons of what happened in 1966. Just 2 days. 2 days ago, it was 27. Today is the 29th, which is the 52nd anniversary of what happened in Kano and in Jos, with the mass killing of about 30,000 people from the southeast part of Nigeria. The difference now is now it's happening to the people that live in Jos by people who are visiting from who knows where, and we keep calling them Fulani herdsmen. These are terrorists. I don't care where they are from. I don't care what their ethnicity or if they actually, herdsmen usually herd cattle. These people are not herding cattle unless you're telling me that you saw some cattle running with them while they were about shooting people with automatic rifles. This is terrible. What's worse is that the government of Nigeria, we keep mentioning this over and over again, and it's disheartening that the government is not doing anything, so that it's almost like nobody's listening. We are saying the same thing over and over again, and the people, you must be doing the same thing over and over again for the same thing to be happening to you. If you want different results, if you want different outcomes, do something differently. Don't sit there and wait for these people to kill you. You you have to defend yourself. Nobody else is coming.
Okay, Mazi Odeluga,
It is sad. Sad in the sense that 52 years later, we're still talking about the same issues. The problem is that nobody has truly examined the first, neither did they examine the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth killings. Now, but I can tell you that there seems to be a few constants.
Yep.
The constants have always been that this happens, and for some reason, the security agencies are unable either to detect it before it happens, prevent it, or even come to the rescue of the people such as to mitigate the event. And nobody has ever been prosecuted, arrested, or even questioned regarding these killings. Now, what should have been the Easterners and many of the widows and the orphans who lost their loved ones in 1966, September 29th, in Jos, what would have been a day for them to reflect and remember. The blood of many innocents are flowing through the streets of Jos.
You know, what's remarkable is that September 29th, 1966 was a Thursday.
Yes.
Yep.
And what happened this time was a Thursday. So September 27, 2018. So should we call them both Black Thursdays? Should we just keep naming every calendar day
So
black?
I'd like to move this discussion slightly. We have Nigeria. We have widespread ethno-religious violence. We have not been able to, in any way, control, not to talk of to curb, to control. It's out of control.
Yes.
Look at Eastern Cameroon, or should I say Western Cameroon,
Yes.
Southwest Cameroon. They are undergoing a lot of difficulty. Again, the government in that case does not even seem interested in trying to bring any sense of control to that region.
And their advisors in France are
Well,
interested
because I wanted to make a point there. Go now, okay, look at Sudan. Okay, southern Sudan. After the independence, there have been the whole country has been racked by violence that doesn't seem to be controllable. Look at Congo. This has been, I would say, from the day of Patrice Lumumba up until today, Congo has not seen peace. Now, compare this with Rwanda. Rwanda saw a genocide. Rwanda saw a civil war. Today, Rwanda is at peace. And I would like to make a conjecture, okay? And you can tell me if you agree or disagree, that the difference between Rwanda and these other countries I have mentioned is that Rwandans came on truth and solved their problem themselves.
and reconciliation.
They told themselves the truth. And they decided, no matter what happens with our neighbors, we will continue to be neighbors. It is better to create good neighbors than to live permanently in enmity. And I believe that that singular action to say, truly, we will all hold people who are at blame responsible for what they have done. People who needed to be punished were punished, but it was done in a clearly non-partisan manner, and the country moved on. And that is something none of these other countries have been able to do. number one. And number two, and most important to me, foreign intervention, the hands. What do they say? The hand is
The voice is the voice of Jacob.
But the
hand instead of Esau.
thank you.
Yeah.
I think that is why they have been able to pull this off, whereas many other countries have.
Yeah, but you know, Rwanda is a little different, if I might suggest, in the sense that you had communities that had dwelt together that had issues. It was ethnic conflict, okay, where they dwell, and amongst them, they had intermarried.
Yes.
So because you find Tutsi wives for Hutu husbands,
Yes.
so you
And
have
vice
children.
versa.
You had children who had children from all those. So you had those things working there.
Yes.
And so when it blew open, when they had this whole thing came down to the genocide that happened, at the end of it, they could sit down as brethren, as brothers, as sisters, as members of the same community and resolve their issue. What I think is unique about the Nigerian situation is what we have not been able, no one has been able to acknowledge. And I mean by that, I mean the generality of Nigerians have to admit that there is a foreign force within Nigeria that is not come to dwell with you or kind of like commiserate with you or intermarry with you. They've come strictly
To displace you.
to kill, annihilate, burn, replace. It is destroy and replace.
Okay, Mazi Odeluga, I hear you, but I want to point out that in 1966 that was not the case.
Now, 1966 was different. What was different in 1966 was that the Igbo, the Easterners, especially the Igbo, were objects of ethnic rivalry, which was growing up, which was kind of like building within the community. Eventually, some people brought in the notion of these people must be killed and be sent out of these communities. And so they went after the Igbo. The Easterners mainly, the Easterners, especially the Igbo. So it was more of ethnic cleansing. They were going specifically, and so the issue was let the Igbos leave us. And this was not just the House of Fulani involved, but locals within the Middle Belt. Now, you also had the military in complicit. This was all part of what followed January 15, 1966 coup.
Okay, because
So that was then.
Yes.
But then it has continued to smolder in minor skirmishes.
I think we should not blow that off.
Yes.
Okay? 2 points. When they started killing Ndi in the north, anybody who was Efe, Ejo, Ibibio, Anan, all the minority eastern regional tribes were quote-unquote Igbo. Because for those who are old enough to remember, there were gazettes, bulletins that were being published by Eastern Nigeria prior to declaration of Biafra.
That's right.
Showing victims. They came from every single tribe in the old Eastern Nigeria.
That's right.
So that's the first thing. So this is not an Igbo thing. Yes, it was because Ndi Igbo were the dominant tribe, it was quote-unquote Igbo. But when they came from Ndi Igbo, that you were Ejo, that you were Epic, that you were Anan, it did not protect you. So that's number one. The second thing I want to point out, yes. The second thing I want to point out, because this may be, it might help us begin to really unravel this thing. The second issue is, even the people in Jos, the indigenous people of Jos, of Bauchi, of all the northern states where mass killing occurred, has any community come out, any state governor, anybody come out to say what happened in 66 was a terrible thing and we should be ashamed of it? Because in the sense of truth and reconciliation, you can sweep horrible things under the carpet, it will not stay there forever.
That's right.
So, you have to. Now we are in 2018. It is the turn of another ethnic minority.
No, it has continued.
Well,
With greater audacity,
well,
because again, going back to the point you made, there has never been anyone who acknowledged that what was done in 1966 was wrong.
yes,
There has never been anybody who came forward and said, look, we need to find ways to make sure that this doesn't happen
never again. In our country,
No.
if we are truly a country.
No, because, I mean, Jos has become a city of mass graves.
Absolutely.
Because after every one of these conflicts,
You bury mass graves. So we are burying graves on top of graves.
that's right. And so the blood of those innocents continue to cry out of that great city. And then you have governments not even paying attention to what's going on. And all that they can, the platitude that of course the current president has learned to say is that we will get to the bottom of this, or we will find the perpetrators and we will bring them to book. No, you know the perpetrators, you know where they live, you know where they sleep,
And you have refused.
and you have refused to call them what they are, and deal with them the way you're supposed to deal with them as the commander-in-chief. So yeah.
Well, I was looking at Facebook and I see one man in Facebook. He's saying that it's very sad and why is the president of Nigeria being received warmly in the UN and elsewhere while his silence is at best dubious. So I don't know the answer to that, but I guess if you are at the UN and you're not wanted by the Hague Court, people will receive you. That doesn't mean you're doing a good job. It's a shame. The thing I'm saying is we'll be calling on this president and his administration from day one of when this whole food and stuff and all the other terrorists, since he got into office, promising that he will take care of Boko Haram. This is not Boko Haram, but it's not any different from Boko Haram. I am tired of saying the administration is not doing it. I'm actually telling people now, you are not doing it. I'm sorry it's happening to you. But even those who are sitting pretty in the east, those who are sitting pretty in the west, I don't know about those in the north, but for these people who are looking at this, and especially those that are in the south that is happening to, and you are keeping quiet, I'm not asking anybody to take up arms and go up to the north and fight, but you should be speaking out. For those who claim to be representing these people, who will go back to their Congress offices and go into their chambers and speak a whole lot of English about the what's the grazing route, and talk about election 2019. Well, if anybody comes talking about these things but not talking about the issues that you're facing that is killing you, the water that is overwhelming you, chase them out of town. You have my information.
Well, along those lines,
But
along those lines,
Yes.
we've had a couple of elections that have held in Nigeria, heralding what is going to happen in 2019. And it has become very clear that the ruling party, the APC, is going to win the election by any means possible. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. For people who are positioning themselves in other parties and hoping for a level playing field, I am sorry for you, because you're not going to get a level playing field.
You've seen what happened.
You have seen, yes. So it is clear that, and so I was watching foreign observers coming out to say clearly this election
they're not telling people what they've done already. No.
Yeah, but the point is, so you make a report and then you go home. After which, you know, there is like ndị Igbo agbara aka na-azọ ala, ndị ji na-azọ.
Talking about Abalaka, so I'm reading this afternoon another one of those publications published today saying that there will be no votes in the east. good luck. I mean, there'll be no votes in the heat. Okay, if that's what you
Why are we not hearing?
that there will be no votes
No,
in
no,
the
no, no,
West
no, 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 no.
and the North.
Why are we not hearing people who have been clamoring for all sorts of issues? You want a referendum. What have you done? Have you had anybody come up on the Senate floor or the House to make a demand that we put referendum up for vote?
So, for those who are posting on the groups that I'm part of, Lasting and Yuba, Ifeanyi Okonkwo, and all those people in Anambra who are looking for senatorial seat, even the ones that are sitting right now, I am so sorry for you guys. Because if I am seeing it from this far, and the problem is you're too close to it, that you don't have the same perspective, maybe you should get perspective. What have those people done for you? How have they been on your issues? Just because they give you a few pictures, give you a few money, and have you post pictures and say, these are the district project or regional project or whatever it is that what you need? Is that doing it for you? Well, I think we've kind of gotten away from the issue of what happened with Just, but this is the issue of what are you doing to make sure that what's happening in Just
what needs to
don't
be
happen
done
to you.
What
Yes.
needs to
Now-
be done? Yeah.
No, this is relevant.
Yes.
What I think is relevant is that just has continued to happen even after 52 years because of failure of leadership.
Yep.
Everything rises and falls on the quality of the leaders that you allow to be over you. The current leadership in Plateau State, the current leadership in Abuja, in Benue, all over Middle Belt, all over the Southeast.
And even the leadership before these ones.
That's
Yes,
right.
yes.
That's
That-
right.
This is not a new
No,
thing.
so-
Absolutely. It's cumulative. Yes. Yes.
So the point is, until the people recognize that they have to choose leaders who they can hold accountable and who will be responsible for them, you will not get a better result.
As your delegate, not to cut you short, in Osun State,
Yes.
they tried to choose a leader. Okay. We saw the result of that.
But the people that we saw on video stuffing ballot baskets or
Yes.
bags,
Yes.
and the people that are actually fighting other people in Osun State
Yes.
to get this done,
Yes.
I bet you a lot of them are from Osun State.
No, I do not disagree with the point I am making is
So the people get who they deserve, what they deserve. If they are part of their own issue, if you're part of making sure your neighborhood is terrible because somebody has paid you to sell your right, you get what you get.
Yeah. No, you're right. I know where Mazobasi is going. There were people on Osun State, they had an election, and it looked like the people wanted to make a choose.
Had a preference.
They had a preference, and justifiably so, because those who know the former governor of APC, I mean, he's owing salary for about more than 8 months going into the election. I mean, the party in power has not paid those who have worked. And no, I mean,
Civil servants.
civil servants. Now,
How are they supposed to take care
no,
of
no,
that?
no. So that in itself will tell you if they had any level of decency, that the man will not even, nobody will be presenting themselves
You will
in
not have
leadership.
the freedom to walk around the neighborhood.
That's the point.
Yeah.
So, but he actually had his name on the ballot,
Yes.
and had people vote for him, and had people stuff boxes for him.
Yes.
Again, you ask yourself, who is deceiving who?
And then you say to INEC, you have all these rules in the book
Yes.
that we all see,
and you have video evidence
and you
of
see faces of these people
electoral
on the video,
malpractice.
and nobody is being charged with anything
No, and EFCC is not hauling people
There
away
you go.
because PMB is in charge of the rigging machine.
That's the point I was making here. That
Yeah.
this is not failure at one level.
It's everybody.
It is a complete sham. It's a complete sham. You have institutions that have suddenly gone silent. You have an electoral commission that has not lived up to its responsibility. I will accept that you cannot, as a commission, predict violence when it occurs. I will accept that maybe these things you did not foresee them and it came upon you suddenly, but you have evidence that they happened.
I I don't know if I will.
Well,
I will
let me give them benefit of doubt. Why has the I think that the Electoral Commission, what they should have done is to immediately cancel the election
not
completely.
wait for people to tell us.
Yes.
Not wait for the foreigners.
Cancel the
tell them that it
election
was-
immediately.
No.
And then invite EFCC
EFCC
to go and round up all this.
It's not a finance. We have the police. EFCC is financial crimes.
You heard that the police stood by. Well, EFCC may be financial crimes, but didn't they go after, what's his name?
Abaribe.
Not Abaribe. Abaribe.
They
Went
go
after
after
Abaribe.
everybody.
Yeah, for things that are not necessarily financial.
Right. But that means they're not doing their job.
So they are now the
No, they are.
the point to be made there is there was a complete failure across all levels. And this is a primer for what is going to happen come 2019.
So we're going to take a break, and when we come back from the break, we're going to talk to, we're going to start the discussion with people in the diaspora, because a lot of them are listening and enjoying this show, but a lot of times they're thinking, what can we do from here? Well, we'll be right back.
Ejikeme Obasi, Amazi Oke Okachukwu. This is Straight Talk Radio, the world as we see it. Coming to you from WGHC 98.3 FM. Your voice, your music, your station. Listen to us this and every Saturday at 4 to 5 p.m. U.S. Central, and this and every Tuesday at 9 to 10 p.m. U.S. Central.
Welcome back, and we're going to play for you an interview that we had last Tuesday with the current president of the African Development Bank. It's Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, and we had some conversation.
Straight Talk Radio, and we welcome you to our program. Thanks for making the time and giving us the opportunity to talk to you.
You're welcome.
So, for those listening to us, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina is the current president of the African Development Bank, formerly the Nigerian Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. So, thank you, and if you don't mind, could you give us a line about African Development Bank and what its mission and strategy is?
I didn't hear what you said.
So I was asking about if you don't mind, if you could tell us a bit about African Development Bank and its mission and strategy.
Okay. The African Development Bank, yes. We have 5 major issues that form the top priorities of the African Development Bank. And the first one is to light up and empower Africa. The second one is to feed Africa. The third is to industrialize Africa. The fourth is to integrate Africa. And the fifth one is to improve the quality of life of the people of Africa. Now, we call those things high five. And it sounds like a way of greeting people, but it's much more in-depth than that. And an analysis done by United Nations shows that if Africa actually just achieves those 5 things that I've mentioned to you, that I call high five, that Africa would have achieved 90% of its sustainable development goals and 90% of the Agenda 2063 of the African Union. So basically, we want to make sure that Africa has universal access to electricity. We want to make sure that Africa is able to feed itself within the next 10 years. We got programs that are actually also looking at how to help Africa be much more competitive in building industries that can create a lot of jobs and make it competitive in global markets. And of course, we also have big programs that are focused on how to create jobs for young people and also empower women on the continent.
Thank you, sir. And talking about the high five, I heard you say Feed Africa, and you're joining us from Scale Up Conference on Agricultural Innovations at the Purdue University Boilermakers in Lafayette, Indiana, and where you were the keynote speaker. So, sir, could you summarize for us on the Feed Africa and this Scale Up Africa Conference on Agricultural Innovations? What was it that you were trying to communicate in your keynote today?
Well, I'm still going to give my keynote later today, but the Scale Up Conference is something. It's a partnership between the African Development Bank and Purdue University. And as you know, Purdue University is a world-class university and well known for its agriculture work. I actually got my master's and PhD degrees right here from Purdue University. And so the work, this particular scale-up conference is looking at the role of technologies in transforming agriculture and the lives of people globally. And the issue is we have a lot of technologies that are there. In the case of Africa, that are enough to feed Africa. It used to produce a lot of food to feed Africa. But many of those technologies are simply lying there on the shelf. And so we're talking about is how do we take those technologies off the shelf and make sure they can reach millions and millions of farmers. You know, and here are some concrete things that we are doing about it from the African Development Bank. First is that the African Development Bank itself, it's investing $24 billion, in agriculture over the next 10 years. Now, $24 billion is a lot of money. And why are we doing that? We're doing that because, it doesn't make sense for Africa to be a net food importing region. Africa, in my view, should be a global powerhouse in food and agriculture. Africa must be able to feed itself with pride. To do that, we must get technologies to farmer and raise productivity of African farmers. And so we're talking about ways in which that can be done. The African Development Bank has just launched an initiative together with the World Bank and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is a $1 billion program it's called Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation. That is to take technologies to the scale of over 40 to 50 million farmers on the continent of Africa. We are also going to be talking during this conference about how to grow private sector, because private sector is the engine of growth, and we've got to make agriculture in Africa not just a development activity. It is not a development activity. It is not a social sector. It is a business as it should be.
Thank you, sir. And I know agriculture has a special place in your heart. I've watched a video of you at the U.S. Department of Agriculture earlier this year, where you were talking about agriculture and how your family and your father was a farmer and wanted you to go the same route. Also, I know that you received the World Food Prize for Agriculture in 2017, and you have developed a program out of it. I think it bears your name, a fellowship. Could you talk about it a little bit?
Well, it was a great honor to be awarded a World Food Prize in agriculture last year. As you know, the World Food Prize is seen as the Nobel Prize for food and agriculture. It comes with a prize, a laureate's prize of $250,000, which I have completely devoted to creating fellowships and that will support young people in agriculture. That will also put in some seed money to help businesses of young people in agriculture succeed. It's a very exciting thing because the reason for that for me is that when you take a look at agriculture, looking into the future, agriculture will become much more knowledge intensive. A lot more innovations will be there. You need a lot more entrepreneurship capacity to engage in the agriculture of the future. So which means that we must begin to train young Africans today to be able to get prepared for that world. And that's why we are building the work on young people in agriculture entrepreneurship at the African Development Bank. We invested last year alone about $340 million in a program that's directed at supporting a new generation of young commercial farmers and agribusiness leaders to develop on the continent. So for what I will do for my foundation side with money I won for the World Food Prize and what we are doing from the African Development Bank, the goal is the same: help to unlock Africa's agricultural potential and build the human capacity of its people to take agriculture as a business.
Thank you, sir. And I was looking at some of the information that is online, and I see that since your leadership from 2016 to 2017, there's been a tremendous growth with the bank as far as the financial goes. I know you have continued to maintain the AAA rating, and also you've continued to grow even the revenue from the year before 2016. I think it was almost like a $300 million turnaround. So how do you continue to do this, and I mean, with the kind of information we get from Africa, from the leadership, it's not the same. It's not that of a great management, but you've continued to do this, and you are an African, educated in Africa and abroad. What would you say to those who are saying there's no good leadership in Africa since you're doing it?
Well, I think Africa has great leadership. I think you have a lot of people running great businesses. I think that you have a lot of leaders that are very creative and very innovative in driving the agenda of their countries. There is no doubt in my mind that, what we just need to do as Africa is to constantly innovate and constantly be at the top of our game in terms of our approach. I don't believe that Africa needs to beg to develop. Africa simply has to have the right policies, the right incentives, the right financing mechanisms to allow businesses to thrive on the continent. That is what we do as African Development Bank now, is that how do we support private businesses to grow a lot more on the African continent? I lead a bank that is doing great. I think we've turned around the bank big time. We're focusing on the things that are very important for the continent, and the bank is very solid financially, as you rightly said in your remarks. We continue to innovate on how to use our balance sheet to do more. Just a week ago, we launched what is called Room to Run, and essentially what the Room to Run means is we are the first multilateral finance institution in the world that will take some of the risks that we have on our, loan portfolio and transfer that to the private sector. And by just simply doing that, we're able to free up $1 billion for us to do more, for our clients in Africa. So we are a very visionary bank. We are an action-oriented bank. We are a very innovative bank, and we are an impact-driven bank. And that's the way it is, because Africa's development has to be a fast track.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your transformational leadership. I know that you're also taking that message to young people. I noticed that later this year, actually in 6 weeks, there's the Africa to Africa, the African Investment Forum that is scheduled to take place in Johannesburg from the 7th to the 9th of November 2018. What's the message there, and what's the bank trying to achieve with that conference?
The bank is working to leverage global pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and other institutional investors to Africa. If you take a look at it globally today, you have roughly $128 trillion of assets under management. They are largely not in Africa. They are outside of Africa. But Africa has huge needs. If you take infrastructure needs alone in Africa, Africa will need anything between $68 and $108 billion annually on infrastructure. We've got to make sure we have electricity, universal electricity, investment in ports, in rail, and in roads, and airports, all the things that you need to make Africa attractive destination for investors. And so that requires quite a lot of capital. So what the Africa Investment Forum is doing, that we have launched, is to try to harness all that global capital, some of that, and bring it to Africa. We are actually working to also help to reduce the risk of lending that private investors face in Africa, whether it's project risk, or market risk, or political risk, so that investments can stay and investments can thrive in Africa. Africa is doing well in terms of the flows of foreign direct investment to the continent, but we think that it needs a lot more faster-paced investment. And the way to make that happen is to have an investment framework that allows investors to come in, look at bankable projects, have those projects do risk, and have environments that will allow their businesses to thrive. That's all we're trying to do with the Africa Investment Forum, holding in South Africa from 7th to 9th of November this year.
Thank you, sir. And then with regards to the investment, when we talk about investment outside of Africa, when we in the diaspora especially, or even the people that we live with, talk about Africa, it's always as an emerging market, and the investments that we are privy to are usually limited to stocks. And with the work you're doing with the high fives, how can the diaspora and African community, how do you think that we could be able to bring our expertise and our skills to bear with what the bank is doing?
Well, I think that the diaspora is one of Africa's best assets, both in terms of knowledge, in terms of skills, in terms of exposure, in terms of experience, and in terms of financial resources that Africa can use and tap and bring for its own development. Africa has to develop with what all it has. And of course, tapping into that diaspora is a huge component of that. If you take the case of electricity, power sector, which is the area where I would say is the number one area, there are lots of opportunities to invest today in renewable energy on the continent. An individual may not be able to do it, but a collection of individuals may be able to invest in small size, off-grid energy companies that will probably produce about 25 megawatts of electricity. So these off-grid systems are becoming very important. So the power sector offers huge amount of return to the diaspora that wants to invest, because you have on the continent today roughly 600 million people that do not have access to electricity. The other part of it is agriculture. See, the 65% of all the land left to feed the world, arable land left to feed the world, is not in Asia, it's not in Latin America, and it's not in Europe, nor in the United States. It's in Africa. So what Africa does with that agriculture is going to determine the future of food in the world. So I think getting the diaspora to come in to invest in the area of food and agribusiness is important. And I cannot explain this enough, because the size of that food and agriculture market in Africa by 2030 is going to be what a whopping $1 trillion US. So there you have it. It's a big business that diaspora can invest in. And of course, diaspora can also connect with their own knowledge into our universities, into our colleges, and also to the private sector also to build viable businesses on the continent.
Thank you, Dr. Desina. It's a great opportunity for us to talk to you, and we thank you for sharing your limited time with us. And we really, really appreciate it. And you're welcome to come back on the program anytime that you have time to talk to us. We'll be glad to learn from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and keep up your great work.
I'm hoping that you were listening, because that's a huge, huge amount of things that we need to unpack. But we'll give you a break. We'll take a break ourselves. We'll come back and we'll discuss that with you. Thank you.
KK Odeluga, Mazi Ejikeme Obasi, and Mazi Oke Okachuku. This is Straight Talk Radio, the world as we see, coming to you from WGHC 98.3 FM. Your voice, your music, your station. Listen to us this and every Saturday at 4 to 5 p.m. U.S. Central, and this and every Tuesday at 9 to 10 p.m. U.S. Central.
Welcome back to Straight Talk Radio, and you're listening to us on WGHC 98.3 FM, which is in the uptown area of Chicago, Northside. And if you're listening to us on radio, we welcome you, but some of you are listening to us on Facebook Live, and you could make comments. If you're listening to us on radio and you'd like to call in, it's 773-27167. Also, if you haven't downloaded the apps, if you have Android, it is the TuneIn Radio app. And if you have iOS, if you have Apple, it is the WGAC 98.3 FM app to listen to us. You're missing something, because if you have any of those apps, you can listen to us anytime, anywhere, not just when you are driving me on the roadside. For those who want to listen audio only, dial the number 156399322. 156399322. And the WGHC is an African diaspora started radio station. It's also a community radio station, meaning that we live on the generosity of the community, which means we are not for profit, and we function that way. None of the volunteers, hosts or coasters, even the people that do the work in the offices are paid. We are all volunteers, but also we need money to be able to run this, keep equipment in order, keep our signals going. So we depend on your generosity, and if you want to help us, and we hope you do, go to our webpage at wghcfm.org, and in the top right hand corner you see a button that says donate. Click it and please do as much as you could. We appreciate your generosity. All donations are tax deductible. Also, we do advertising in some of the other shows, even this one. And if you want to place an ad, call 872-208-3069, or email us at 98.3fmwghc@gmail.com. That is 98.3fmwghc@gmail.com. We will respond to you. You can also go to Instagram at WGHC98.3FM, Facebook WGHC98.3FM, YouTube WGHC98.3FM, and we will be able to get back to you from any of that. If you call now and you're having technical problems getting through 872-208-3069, leave us an email or call back later and we will be able to get back to you. So if you were listening a short few minutes ago, we had an interview. We were fortunate enough and we were graced by, it was an honor of ours to have the African Development Bank president while he was visiting Purdue University, where he was a keynote speaker at the I will tell you shortly. He had an interview. He had a short while and graced us with an interview. And if you listen to the interview, it's full of nuggets. It is full of having wisdom, and that shows why the bank is succeeding. So the bank has continued to grow. He took over leadership of the bank.
It's a scale-up conference.
The scale-up conference at Purdue University
on agricultural technology.
Thank you for it. And he himself was a boilermaker, so he was returning home, so to speak. But he took over charge of the African Development Bank since May of 2015, and he succeeded Donald Kaberuka of Rwanda, who was the bank president before him. And the bank has continued to do well. Actually, it's maintained its AAA rating. Actually, it's grown its revenue year over year. That it's got about 300% year over year from 2016. That's a healthy bank. So you could tell why, talking to him, just a few minutes we had with him and the information we were able to get. I will stop here and let Mazi and as he takes over. What struck you from the interview that you just heard?
Well, I think this is in line with what we have tried to teach here in Straight Talk. Ndị Igbo si onye ụwa jụrụ anaghị atụ ụjọ. If the world turns their back on you, you have to look inwards and find it. You have to look inwards and find it. These are people who are creating a way. The question is, can we ride these institutions to success? We have always said it. One of the biggest problems we have in Africa is that we do not have institutions. We have animals. We have animals in abundance that call themselves presidents, senators, House of Rep, whatever. So you can call, just like you can call a lion, a tiger, a giraffe. That's the kind of animals that we have all over Africa. We do not have institutions. This is an institution. He has clearly elucidated what he can do for Africa. Notice, this is not a Nigerian bank. It is not an Igbo bank. It's not a Ghanaian bank. It is not a Kenyan bank. It is not from Zimbabwe. It is not South Africa. No. Perhaps in that is the first lesson. Think global. Put out, no, bring your head out of the sand where you are buried in and begin to look around. Because these are the things that will bring light to Africa. For too long, we run to the West, we run to, now we run to China. And China happily is buying up Africa. How long?
China is investing.
How long? I will let Bazi Odaluga say something.
Anyway, the thing is, let's the first thing that I have learned to always go back to the fact that before the Europeans arrived, Africa was thriving. No. I mean, we got to be clear about that. You know, because oftentimes when you say, oh, this is an African initiative, then people begin to quibble and shake. Oh, we don't even know what they put together. No. We have been doing things, running things, trading, organizing things. Actually, we were we gave the world the first civilization, and we were participating in the first global trade on that Silk Road, Trans-Sahara trade, before even you had the transatlantic, which was minuscule, compared to what went through the Atlantic, the Sahara. Do you understand what I'm saying? We built civilizations, we built empires, we had creative governance, we had governance at various levels. We had peace. You know, for Africa's population to have grown to where it was, it meant that people were born, they survived, and they were fed, they ate well, they didn't die from diseases, and they survived to have their own children. And so the cycle of life was continuing. So by the time the Europeans came, they didn't see a desert, they didn't see a deep populated, but they saw a highly dense population that was able to feed itself. So everything that ADB, the African Development Bank, has articulated to bring back to Africa was what we once had.
What they are bringing back to Africa, because this has been in session and it's been going.
Yes.
It's a thing for us to rediscover some of our strengths, because a lot of us do not pay attention.
No, we've grown up. There's a generation that feels that this has never happened, that we have to look to the West. Now, remember the West, Portugal came to us because they didn't have. Spain then came because they didn't have. The Dutch came because they didn't have. And finally, the British arrived and saw what they have never had. And then they got greedy and they started the cannibalization. Now, why is Africa where it is today? Is because there was a gathering at the Berlin under King, what's his name? Bismarck.
Bismarck of Germany.
Yeah. That's right. And so they cannibalized Africa. They divided her up and set it up where it would be not functional. All it will work was be a place for extraction of resources. So they destroyed our own local technology and our own indigenous knowledge, and majority of us Africans began to be educated away from their cultures and from the things that made us great. So now we need to shed that cloak. It is not independence. The independence movement of the 50s and the 60s was a sham, in the sense that we kind of like created this political process to say, if the flag is lower, if the Union Jack comes down and the flag goes up and we say it's a Nigerian flag, we are independent. No, there was no what I call a fundamental change in our thought process.
In other words, we are still not independent.
So now, African Development Bank has been created by Africa to replace, to function like what the World Bank is to the rest of the world. Now, what is the difference in my view? If you take money from the World Bank, get ready for structural adjustment programs that will come with it, which is at some point, IMF, all these all have some neo-colonialistic agenda that they tie to it.
In the 80s, you understood structural.
Well, much of Africa. Much of Africa, yes.
Yeah. Now, but from the things that I've read and hearing the president of African Development Bank, what they are doing is to find ways, like he talked about, an investment framework that begins to reduce the risk of lending and the political risk of investment. Now, breakdown, what does this mean? They have funds within the bank that when, depending on who provided the funding, if it's going to small business, small or medium scale businesses, there's a requirement on the part of the host government to reduce all the barriers, both regulations and the burdens upon the businesses to survive, so that those businesses will thrive and provide employment and empowerment for the people. To me, this is an African solution to African problems.
So let me chime in. Since we like to put the back. Soa went out to Suez. Some fell on the rocky ground. Birds stick to it. End of sea. Some fell among the thorns. The thorns grew up and choked it to death. Some fell on fertile ground. My question, where in Africa, politically, do we have fertile ground?
Well, before you answer that question, because when we started, we were talking about how we used to do things like this in Africa. Portugal came because they didn't have, and they came to people who had, and England. Janet Jackson then released an album as a So, what have we done for us lately? If you look in Cameroon, right next to it, there is no problem. You go a little bit to DR Congo, there is problem. You move a little bit to Kenya. If it's not Odinga this, it's Odinga that, or people are shooting from Somalia. You decide you move a little bit towards Somalia. If you decide to move south, I mean, ANC is a problem. Where in Africa is the question you ask? Are we doing it? Are we doing it right?
That is my question.
Well, let's start the question. Because I think it was JFK who told Americans it's not what have the government done for you.
What have you done?
What have you done for you? What have you as an African done to make your life better? Not how has my president made my life harder? How has the administration made my life harder? What are you doing today to make sure that you're building an Africa you can hand off to your children? Not government, you. And that's what AfDB offers, the African Development Bank, AfDB.org. African Development Bank was started in about the same time that a lot of countries were getting independence, since the three. And it was put together with 3 branches. And it's made up, well, the 3 branches, one of them is actually, there's an independent bank, there is the big body that's African Development Bank, and then there's actually a Nigerian substitution that put in some money. But they've also continued to raise money from other sources. And actually what makes the bank do as great as they're doing now is they are the one bank that shares the risk with all the people that, so they just don't give you a loan and get away. They give you a loan and work with you to make sure that you achieve your goals and that their money don't get lost. They're not interested in coming after you to get you to bankruptcy. They're interested. They actually have sustainable development goals, SDGs, that they're going after. It is not about the money. It's about what you do with the money and the life that is saved, the life that is grown, the projects that are beneficial to the community. So they do have a motive behind what they're doing that is not driven just
that is holistic.
Well,
yes.
but you see,
But
okay,
yeah.
Look at something else we need to look at. Africans, young Africans, have incredible ingenuity that has been locked away by systems that stifle any kind of progress. And that's really, I'm sorry, I have to keep coming back to this. You have to create a climate that is conducive for growth. The bank says the host government has to remove barriers, tariffs. If you have to fill 600 forms and bribe 20 people to be able to export 1 crate of whatever it is you have, how do you go about doing that? If you have 200 checkpoints between where you produce and where you export, each of them collecting a bribe, so the point I'm trying to make is, even as we are talking about what the bank does, the onus is on all of us to begin to really target our government to say, you know what, you guys, you have sat on this pile of you know what, as they call Africa, for too long. It's time to move aside. Let us see if something better can come.
also looks, I mean, I agree, but if you get a logo of SDB, of African Development Bank on your car while you're driving, and the police stops you and you point out the logo, it does a whole lot of speaking for you. Because the person that understands will understand that this is, I mean, you don't mess with this person because it's not just his power. He's got more power. While you're pressing your government, make sure you know where your money is coming from and the motivation behind the money that's supported.
No, you see, you need to understand the political structure in Africa, and that is actually the sad part of this whole thing. A lot of the people who have perpetuated themselves in power have learned to have external big brothers who are their funders and who are the ones who keep them in position by selling arms to them, so that one thing that they may not have food, they may not have food, but you see that God, bullets, tank, and when the plane, they'll have it in abundance. So that's one. Two, their goal is to enrich themselves and a few people, and not really to pull the community, the entire nation, to make a difference in people's life. Now
they're borrowing money, just not just from the same bank.
So when they now feather their nest and mismanage the resources, now instead, when they run out of cash and the people now start agitating, their handlers will know that this is a recipe for government change, and they need to secure their place. Then they call them back and say, okay, we need to give you a soft loan. And that soft loan is, of course, another hook chain that is dragging African youth across the deserts and across the Mediterranean Sea, where they are dying.
Leaving them in mass graves.
Leaving them in mass graves in the desert, leaving them in mass graves, under the waters of the Mediterranean Sea, and everybody's yelling about African migrants. No, it is the monies that are coming out of European capitals and the American capitals that are dragging these migrants all the way back to slavery in those nations.
And it's not just the money that they borrow; it is also
the money they stole.
Even the money that is given to the government free, that looks like it's free.
Donations, aid. No, but most of the aid requires that you buy from the donor.
We talked about the Chinese. We talked about Chinese.
You buy planes from the US. You get it.
So, I wanted to point two things out, after which maybe we can really start talking about how do we begin to solve this problem, because at the end of the day, that's the point. Yes. I just want to say, last week, or was it 2 weeks ago, we talked about France and the colonial debt, and how France single-handedly, through the Foreign Legion and the soldiers from Francophone African countries that have gone through the Foreign Legion, have been used to ensure that every single Francophone country falls in line.
Yep.
Okay?
Still gotta pay what you
Britain, especially people who understand Nigeria, with specific reference, again, to Ndi Igbo and other Easterners from Biafra that know the role Britain played during the Civil War of 67 to 70.
National interest.
Okay? Understand exactly what it is that Britain can do when you are playing against them. And I want to point out, incidentally, that right now, thank you, the European Union has decided to play hardball with England. Just today, or was it yesterday, Toyota has declared that unless something is done to solve this Brexit problem, they're going to pull out of Britain. So, Britain, if you do not know, Britain's breast, where they go to suck breast milk, is Nigeria.
Oh, didn't we just have a visit less than a month ago by Theresa May?
That's the point.
Dancing
So,
she was doing in the tree. So, I mean,
if you think that all of a sudden everybody will let you grow. I am telling you that especially now, where the economies of the world are beginning to shake, everybody tries to protect that goose that lays the golden egg. And for a lot of the West, it is Africa.
That's right.
So, as we're having this conversation, why dear say onu makwa onu na akpa unu gesi the only one papa unu gesi kochim which I don't know how you say that in English. A widow is telling the brethren of the kinsmen of our dead husband, as you are talking about divvying up his wealth.
No, those who are going
to prepare
for his funeral, that they should also talk about who will be a surrogate husband for her.
Who will take care of her? Who will take care of her?
Yeah,
so
let all the things be in the same
put it on the table. Because we are hearing these two things as if they are things that are separate.
Yes.
I'm making the point that they are all exactly very related.
Yes.
And if things continue this way, the future economically for Africa is in jeopardy.
So let me tie together what we talked about in the first segment and what we're talking about in the second segment. So we're talking about what's happening in the global village now.
Yes.
And before we talked about what's specifically happening in Jos and what today is compared to what happened in history.
Yes.
So all the disturbances that are going on, and these people who visited Nigeria, the global people coming to Nigeria, or having you come visit them and give you money and aid and equipment, especially war equipment. Where are they? So and these are countries that are interested in stopping terrorism, whatever it shows us,
yes. Except
where are they when this terrorism is visiting you in your living room? They haven't said a word because it hasn't become part of their national interest yet.
No, it's not their interest. Their interest is to have you in turmoil and jeopardy. Okay, because for example, in Jos, if you are afraid for your life, if you are afraid to go to church on Sunday, which is the most sacred thing most people do in Africa, how can you go to the farm? AfDB is talking about how
feed
to
Africa.
make feed
one of the
Africa.
high fives is number 2 is feed Africa.
How to
industrialize
industrialize
Africa?
Africa.
If you are
How to integrate Africa.
How are you going to
how
light
to
up
improve
and
life
Africa?
And that's right. Those are key, important life issues, national issues, things that have great impact upon the life of the continent. Yet, how can people be addressing this when they are not
you
sure?
You cannot even leave your house.
That's right. But those also could be tied to their abject poverty and the challenges and the difficulties of governance that have not allowed coexistence, because what the political class is doing is when they fail to develop their countries, they now point fingers about who is not doing what they're doing. So they get their own people to go after some other person. So there's always confusion and scapegoat. That's right. So, but be that as it may, Africa have lived through that for the last 600 years. I would say from the beginning of the 15th century, when the Portuguese arrived and the Africans began to be taken away into slave camps and plantations at the shores of Africa, San Tome, Cape Verde, and Equatorial Guinea. That has been the African story. But there is an opportunity to change that narrative. That is the African diaspora. I keep going back to the African diaspora because it's not just those of us who just showed up, the JJCs.
Oh, there are ones that were.
I'm talking about Africans.
A different kind of ship.
Africans who have been here 400 years, 500 years, built great countries and nations all through the West Indies, all through the Caribbean area, South America, North America, Canada, and United States. You have the largest resources of Africans, and Africa's best resources is our people. That's why when the first thing that the Europeans took out of Africa was not gold, it wasn't the coal, it wasn't the diamond, it was the best resources that we have, which is our people. Our people. And we came all throughout the diaspora. We built up communities, we built up civilizations, we built up economies that sustained great civilizations. Now, the French Empire What was the who fed them? It was the sugar cane. It was the sugar canes of Hispaniola, of Haiti and Cuba that made them what they are.
Yes.
The Spanish government, who were the people? Then the Portuguese, the British Empire,
U.S.
and the United States of America. Do you understand? It was the Africans that cleared her frontiers, rebuilt her communities, built an economy of cotton, built economy of tobacco, and with industrialization, it was our fingers that turned those wheels. My point being that the best agriculturists are found here in the United States. That's what Africans have always done since they got here. So if you're talking about feeding Africa, this is the time for the African diaspora to really come together and connect with the African Development Bank. In my view, the African Development Bank should really craft a great program and have a tool to be able to mobilize this resource out of the African diaspora, not just for technocrats, not just for people with expertise, professionals who have done things, and those who will come with a fresh view.
We can't wait for the bank.
No, but
I agree 100% with what you said.
Yes.
I am also calling on all Africans. Don't wait for the bank to knock on your door, give you a phone call. Please come out and organize with us. Wherever you are.
I think the bank has done this.
Wherever
the
you
bank has crafted. So actually, for those who like to travel and go to Nigeria at some point again, I will advise you to get on the plane and go to Johannesburg,
November 7th.
Johannesburg, South Africa.
7 to 9.
November 7 to 9. There is an African Investment Forum that is going to focus on technologies for Africa agricultural transformation. That if you go to that conference, you make a whole lot more connection than you have already. That's one great reason to go. But also, you get to hear the bank discuss this in details, what they plan to do, the plans that they have specifically for Feed Africa and agriculture. Now, the bank has a website, AfDB.org, where you can get a whole lot more information. I'm one of those that actually went to IFC, World Bank, Financial, to dig up a whole bunch of things when I thought I was going to love, when I was investing in when I thought I actually did. But I couldn't get any help, or I couldn't get what I wanted out of it. But I went to AfDB.org and I could see, for those who are young, because I did this when I was in my 20s, I was a shining star, I'm getting older now. But even if you're in your 90s and you're in diaspora, one of the things we really do very well is we organize very well in the communities that we live, especially when we're organizing for social events. I am asking, could we please do much more than social events? Could we organize for economic reasons? Could we organize for SDG, Sustainable Development Goals?
That's the point.
Could we organize, because the only way I see Africa doing what Africa could do, actually, I'll go back in history. Actually, I like that Masacre took it all the way back from slavery, all the way there. People will probably wonder, why do we do that? Why do we talk about yesteryear? It's not that we are fond of what happened. We want to give you a context and tell you who you are, so that you know what power is in you, so that you could manifest it today. If you're sitting idle and you are the strongest man on earth, but you're sitting in front of your TV, watching TV, nobody will know. The only way we know you're the strongest man is you show up in the village square and start lifting things that are heavy. And that's what I'm calling African diasporas to do. Get out in the market square, forget all about this Owambe and dance and all these other entertainment that we do very well. Sukus. Yeah, you could dance sukus on your power station. The power station you build out of
have built
the power station at the Atlantic, you could dance sukus all you want.
Yes.
So and actually have the power to play sukus forever.
Yeah, but they are permanent. Well, so the other issue is this I am directing to the diaspora population in Europe and in North America, especially here in the United States of America, where
South America.
You look at what is happening in Congress right now. You look at how divided it is between Republicans and Democrats, and all the things you fight about, a lot of things you fight about come end up being in some way economic. We talk about economic policies. Black America is at the bottom of the totem pole. And yet, there is a huge store that we could tap that would benefit the whole of Black America and at the same time benefit Africa. Therefore, I am also calling on all people of African descent that live in America, begin to learn the politics of the day. It is not good enough for somebody to tell you, I am a Democrat, I believe in choice. Those things may be important, they will not lift you out of poverty. What will lift you out of poverty is these things that allow opportunity. Because when we talk about the African Development Bank putting money in Africa, they are also looking for expertise to go with that money. The expertise is here.
The president of African Development Bank was at some point in Purdue.
Was in Purdue, a graduate.
And his PhD.
Absolutely.
He's been outside the country, so he could take that knowledge back. Anybody that could trace their DNA strand all the way to Africa is
you should.
The best investment you could make for your future is to actually get you connected to your DNA. And one way to do that is to get together with people of the same DNA strand, or people who wish those people of the same DNA strand great luck, to start investing in those emerging markets. There's no better emerging market than Africa. You know, and this is the one time I give you permission to just call it Africa and not worry about
well, so, you know, for those of us who have kids that have gone through college, we know that the people of African descent have very strong sororities and fraternities. Okay, they have a sisterhood, brotherhood, and even those that belong to mixed sororities and fraternities also have found a way to do things that link each other. Yes, I am begging, use these things to your advantage. There is a lot of economic opportunity in Africa that will benefit you greatly. And when we talk about it, all comes down, Black Lives Matter. The way you treat people of color in America is because you are still at the bottom of the totem pole. The minute, absolutely, the minute you begin to economically lift yourself, the minute you begin to have an alternative to America, that, it's getting hot in here, I'm out of here. You go to Ghana, you go to Nigeria, you go to Zimbabwe, you go, it is all possible.
Are you now a Galvanist?
Yes. Marcus Garvey?
No.
Yes.
No.
Globalist.
No.
Globalist.
You don't need,
this is not globalization.
You don't need to run away from it.
There's nothing wrong with Garvey.
No. You don't need to run away from it. Yes. I pulled that point.
Yes.
Because I realized that what Marcus Garvey was advocating is quintessential Africa
for Africa.
No. You see, he says Africa for Africans, but also he believed in the return. Yes. Because that is an African thought. The essence of a journey is the return. Yes. There's always this hope, the exilic hope for every group is that
there will be a return for the people again.
There will be a return back to the homeland.
Yes.
Back to the homeland. So for many African Americans, and I speak specifically to the African Americans, there has been these waves of seeking for a return. Yeah. And we saw that. We see that in the days of slavery, where there was, after the Revolutionary War, the Africans who fought on the side of the British, who were promised freedom.
Yes.
Yeah, they were taken to Nova Scotia, later to England, and then finally they ended up back in Sierra Leone, Freetown. That was the initial cohort that formed the Freetown, the returnees, African returnees. Then of course you had the people from North Carolina that went back to Liberia. And Marcus Garvey's point was to actually invest in a ship and industries that will see the repatriation of Africans back to Africa,
their homeland,
because of the treatment that Africans were getting here.
Yes.
Now, even within the missionary establishment, it was the Africans that returned, the returnees, that were the first missionaries to take the gospel back to Africa, because they still had knowledge of the language before even any European missionary agencies organized.
They came with the supposed trade routes.
That's right. So my point being that what had happened is that transatlantic corridor, yet it was a middle passage of pain, but should now be transformed into a passage of joy, of joy, hope, and celebration, to see the sons and daughters of Africa return back to Africa to participate in her development and her growth.
What you just said reminded me of Martin Luther King when they were in Alabama and they had the water hoses done on them.
Yes.
And he was talking to people. He said, well, these people came out with water hoses. He says, we know water. Actually, even some of you were baptized with water. Some of you were dipped into water. Yeah. What you're saying is the transatlantic past, like he was referencing the water, it was meant to be a thing of culture. But it actually, if you go through it and survive on the other side, it builds character. Just like if you have a farmhouse, and after years of living with the wood and chipping at it with chairs, and it builds character in the wood.
Yes.
Now it becomes part of the beauty.
Yes.
What we are saying is, I mean, it's not forget what happened in the transatlantic passage. Know that if you could go through that, you've been seared by the fire. You've passed through the fire, and the job of fire is to refine gold. You have been refined. So take that gold all the way back and show your shine.
Yeah, and that is really important, because I see a day that Nigerian crude oil, the sweet
brand,
Bonnie Light,
yes,
will be pumped out of the shores of the Delta, brought to refineries in North America by Africa. No, I'm just saying.
Will refine
no.
And give them the finished product.
I'm talking about African people of African descent.
Yeah. Right here.
Brought to our refineries here, refined, and those petroleum products, those gases and all the products will be pumped in the inner city, in gas stations owned by people of African descent. So this is my dream, that the agricultural revolution of Africa and the agro-businesses in Africa will be propelled by the ingenuity of those of our brethren who were at Tuskegee Institute and understood what can be done with peanuts.
And even those who are in Purdue today.
And those who are in Purdue today. Yes. So again, Africa is no longer that wonder place where people really don't know how to connect. This bank presents a landing place for those who may not know where to begin to access and how to really get into Africa. If you interface with the African Development Bank, then they will lead you into Africa. They will lead you into Africa. And so for those who are listeners on this program, I will ask you just to stay tuned, because at some point, Trade Talk will begin to talk about maybe concrete things that could be done.
Oh yes,
in partnership.
Specific things.
I'll give you an idea. So I mentioned about the parties and cutting down on the parties. The other thing is we do it for as individuals. We go home and build that townhouse that you're going to spend a single week in, if you're lucky, and then every 2 weeks. Okay. And then you have to clean out the dusty windows. So you spend a single week, but the few days that you go in there is clean out the dust. And then you have to pack and wrap everything up just in time. And sometimes we invest in businesses in Africa, but we do it simply so your risk is higher. One of those practical things is not talking to your friends. Now, some of you invest with in the US. Some of you go to parties with in the US. If you start selling those party money, or the monies that you give out over the weekend, you could actually start putting that money aside and pull it as a group, have an investment group that you form, so that when you go to the bank, not only are you sharing your risk with the bank, but you're sharing your risk with multiple people, and there is beauty in parties. I mean, by that I mean there is beauty in coming together as one of people. Out of many one, the equilibrium. Okay. So I think we want to take a break, and then we'll be right back to wrap up.
Ejikebe Obasi, Amazi Oke Okachuku. This is Straight Talk Radio, the world as we see it. Coming to you from WGHC 98.3 FM. Your voice, your music, your station. Listen to us this and every Saturday at 4 to 5 p.m.
And
US
people
Central,
commented on
and
this.
this
You know, we
at
gotta
every
find-
Tuesday
we
at
gotta
9 to
send this
10
to
p.m.
him.
US Central.
You know, Emeka is interested in it. Yeah.
Welcome back to Straight Talk Radio on WGHC 98.3 FM. Before we took a break, we wanted to take a pause and also encourage our listeners who want to participate to call us at 773-942-7167, 773-942-7167, or you can leave us a message on our Facebook page and we will be able to get it and talk about it live. So we want your participation, but what we just talked about, we started earlier talking about what's going on today with the herdsmen, as they are called, and the massacre that's going on in Jos. Actually, about 780 something people are killed. I know one newspaper was reported up to 108. I'm not sure how that actually is. Most of the foreign media is reporting that about 80 are killed and a lot of people are maimed and injured. Any number is a terrible number. But what we started from there, and then we talked about how do we take advantage of the institutions that we have available to us. And one such is African Development Bank. We had an interview with the current president of African Development Bank while he was in the US for a conference, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. And the bank has maintained its AAA rating for these many years. AAA, if you don't know, is one of those terms that says that the bank is on great financial footing. There is no run on the bank anytime soon. It's not just a bank that you go, I mean, it's not like your ordinary bank you go put your money in. This is a bank that is set up as a development bank similar to World Bank, similar to IFC, who has some sustainable development goals that they are interested in. They actually call them high five of them. Light up, empower Africa, feed Africa, industrialize Africa, integrate Africa, improve the quality of life for the people of Africa. This is the SDGs that they have lined out, and on those they stand to make loans to businesses, their RMC, their regional member countries, on projects that they want to do. But it's not just that they do give you some money and step away and come after you if you don't pay. No, they actually share the risk with you. They make sure the project is successful because they have this development goals that is pushing, is motivating them. They also partner with a lot of NGOs. So one of the programs they have is a partnership with Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yes.
So they do have money that are grants or monies that are from donated that they use to make sure that you get your goals done. So it is something that it's useful to anybody who's actually, a lot of people, a lot of young people in Africa starting businesses. You're wondering, how am I going to get investors, VCs, and there is also this bank, African Development Bank, available to you. That's an option to look for to partner.
But you know, the other aspect that people, I guess, you also know, there are other foreign governments that have put monies in the bank for projects in Africa. Designated projects. So you have those kinds of opportunities.
Access to
that. Yes. And then of course it means that also means that people who have the money, venture capitalists, can also designate certain funds for what is their interest in Africa. One of the key areas that now is coming up is education. That Africa needs to improve her education system in order to catch up with the 21st century. You know, apart from the mineral resources that we have, but human capital development has actually not happened well. in Africa because of, yes, because again, it goes back to what I talked about. In the days of the military juntas, during the Cold War, it was all about amassing military hardware. So you find out defense budgets will be running about 20-30% of the entire budget, and then 2% is dedicated to health and education.
Why do you think the country is done?
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
So Africa is not investing in education because her
They're
leaders,
busy buying things from overseas.
her leaders,
Military equipment.
that's
Well,
right.
you make more money selling a fighter jet than selling chalk.
Yes. And also more money will be made by in kickback when he's running in millions of dollars.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to talk about, because it goes in many ways to the root of this discussion. You cannot have sustainable growth where there is turmoil. We look at
Talking about the seat that fell on the rocket.
absolutely. We look at we started this conversation with Nigeria. We talked about the widespread killing of southeastern Nigeria in northern Nigeria. Okay. And that has in many ways low level continued. And now, over the past 4 years, has flared up big time.
Epidemic
in,
proportion.
yes,
So what you're saying, it was endemic.
Yes.
Then it now is going up in epidemic proportion.
Spike. Yes.
And we know what happened when Ebola was an epidemic. We found a way to solve it, but this one we don't seem to.
Well, I think I am going to say something that may be controversial, but I think somebody needs to say it. Biafra, the Nigerian side, the slogan was to keep Nigeria one is a task that must be done. To which I ask, why? Why?
That's the task.
Why is it that Nigeria must be one?
That's
The only reason three of us are sitting here as co-hosts to this program is that three of us agree to co-host this program. If Mazi Odeluga decides that there is something he would rather do with his time, how dare we tie him to this chair and force him to
host
co-host?
Straight Talk Radio is a task
That must be done.
Because I think we need to begin to rethink some of these concepts. Western Cameroon today is begging,
to be left alone.
let my people go.
Pharaoh is not listening.
And Pharaoh
He
refuses
needs
to
them
listen.
lessons.
No, but again,
I am not advocating the breakup of any country, but I am very strongly advocating that if a people believe that they can do better on their own, there should be no reason for you to shackle them, especially to a failed system.
yeah, but Mazi Obasi,
Yes.
I will advocate for the breakup of countries.
Okay.
And this is why.
Okay. Well, you're taking it a step further.
No,
Okay.
no,
No, go on.
no,
This is the
because
fact that WGHC says that the views expressed on this program are
Solely
solely
those of the
no. Let's stop confusing ourselves.
Yes.
Because my brethren in the church will say, God has brought us all together. Let's pray, and God will keep us together. Yes. Okay. Because there's a scripture in Acts 15:26. It talks about the fact that God is the one that determines the boundaries of nations and all that. So, but let's understand that at the Tower of Babel was where God created the languages.
He decided that
in modern day Babylon.
these people
Yes.
don't need to be together.
So that's okay.
Yeah,
So
this
that
is in the
to
time.
me, that was where the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Hausa, the Fulani, the Nupe, the Burial, the Ijo, the Efik, the Ibibio, the Ogoja, all the ethnicities within the Edoman, the Kwa, the
Bini,
Bini, the Ga, the Fanti, all the ethnicities within Africa was born, ordained by God. So for example, the fact that I'm an Igbo man, it's a decision that was made by God, not by me. So I am born Igbo. So now I am an Igbo man living and residing in America. My children tomorrow might be Igbo people living in Australia or New Zealand. The next 2, 3, 4 generations may be born in Atlantica, or even in the North Pole.
Or they may find themselves back in Africa.
And they may find
on
themselves
another planet that is not the Earth.
the dead.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Yes,
Now,
yes. How are we gonna,
so
how are we gonna do
so
it in this
that
event?
was the way we were
Yes.
until the Europeans arrived. Some cartographer will look at the land, draw it, and give it a name. There was a time we used to be called Southern Sudan.
Oh yes.
There was a time that whole West Africa was called Biafra land.
Yes.
There was a time some cartographer decided we were interior, Sudan interior.
Yes.
Then all of a sudden, you know, it started morphing.
Yes.
So when Mr. Golden arrived in what was present-day Nigeria and built some trade posts, it was called
The Niger area.
Niger area. There was Gold Coast, there was Slave Coast, of which we were part of Slave Coast. There was Rice Coast and all that, Sugar Coast and Cotton Coast. Whichever way the Europeans decided to name us.
No, they didn't. No.
Eventually, when they started fighting among themselves, because everybody was running in trying to take position within Africa, Bismarck said, okay, everybody come over to Berlin. Okay, my great-grandfather was sitting in Abatete.
He was not invited.
He didn't have a choice.
Okay, and this man met with a bunch of people he doesn't know.
That have no idea where Africa.
And then they decided that Britain would take part of our Nilo.
Yes.
And they decided that Germany will have Cameroon and have part of Togo. And then so they divide. Then after World War I,
They took it away from Germany.
they
gave
gave
it to France.
France and England
Spoils
divided.
of war.
To the winners,
Spoils
to the
of war.
spoils. Yes.
No,
Yes.
how can you be toying with the destinies of people? Now, and today, those boundaries, Africa see it as sacrosanct. Oh, no, 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 no. It has always been like this. Who told you? No. So those boundaries were created by men. And the irony in it is that the same way we all came to the US. Imagine all of a sudden we decided dividing Chicago and said that this one, Nnewi people should take this side. Ikwere Isu people, okay, this is your corner. And then we now hoist up flags all around and telling everybody, this is our Abatete.
If you cross this,
You are no longer
You're no longer
they're no longer an indigent. So we need to wise up to this whole nonsense. So then what complicated the Nigerian story is the arrival of Malam Usman Dan Fodio
on a quest.
on a jihad to reform Islam in what he called was bad in northern part of Nigeria, among the Hausa states and minorities in the northern part of Nigeria. And so he established a Sokoto Caliphate, illegal, but he conquered, and so he had the spoils of war. Then you had the Kanem Borno Empire. So his push was towards the south. Of course, the Nupes and the Biriam, and of course all the Middle Belt people fought him there. He took part of the Yoruba land at Ilorin. Now, then the British arrived. Captain Lugard, okay, you're now the head of the West African Frontier Force. So you decide that now you've conquered the Sokoto Caliphate, and now you've taken the west, and you've subdued the south, the east. Now you want to bring it north, south and north together, and then you call them a country. But to tell you the foolishness of what we have continued to do, even the British, when they left, supposedly, they didn't feel that we should have a central government. The founding fathers of modern day Nigeria sat down and negotiated a regional autonomy that was independent and that was with a weak center.
Yes.
But what is holding the task No, the 1966, yes. And let me say it. Let me say it. That he was also our brother.
I agree.
Hiroshi. Who took that constitution
and decided that military knows better. Let's centralize the military command.
Because now we are Supreme Military Council. Meanwhile, he had promised 2 years he will hand over power.
Well, he didn't get to.
No, I'm just saying.
Yes.
So you should have kept the system the way it is. Okay, the ones that happened, our friends in Whitehall screamed that this is the best thing that happened to them since sliced bread.
Now they can just go to one place.
They can go to one man, and Jack Gowan was the man. So he now had to, they gave him a little sentence to make Nigeria one. And because of to make Nigeria one, he sacrificed the lives of 3 million Igbo children through starvation.
I think that's all good, but you have to look all, you got to bring it forward.
Look at everything else that has come subsequently. Yes.
No, every death, you see, because again, under his 1966, July 29, 1966, happened under his watch. May happen under his watch.
July 29, September 29.
Yes, happened under his watch.
Yeah, no, there's not all the things you see in the video, the disturbances. Those are on Gowon. Those are on Gowon because he was the military command, supreme military commander.
Supreme.
Yes. And
they didn't know about all
well, no, so but yeah, it goes back to.
So my point is, divide them.
Well,
if they wish to be divided.
No. The people have been. The Boko Haram came and said they want to form a caliphate.
Yes, but the thing is, Boko Haram is one of those social groups, if I call it that is speaking for a vast amount of people that don't agree with them. So until you could get people who agree with them, and they say we really agree.
No, yes. Do a referendum. If you do a look, by the way, the northeastern Nigeria is no longer under the command of Abuja. I can tell you that.
Yeah, that's
if
true.
It is, why are we hearing all this?
No,
every day.
They have cornered the northeast. It's no longer a part of Nigeria.
If Buhari wants to prove, let him go and campaign in the northeast.
Yeah, let him go to Meduguri.
No, let him go to Meduguri and have a
mission.
No. He's contesting for presidency. Yes. Let him show me APC offices all throughout the northeast, and actually have campaign rallies in every city.
Bama Gamboru.
He shouldn't come to the US and be basking in electricity and the air conditioner. He should go to northeast of Nigeria. Yes. And if he had enough sense, he would leave the General Assembly and go straight to Middle Belt, Jos. And please, Mr. Vice President, stop traveling for him.
Well, if Osibanjo wants to go, that's fine. That's what he is part of the administration.
No. You see a pattern. Yes. Why is Buhari not showing up? You are the father of the country. You won't show up to.
He's busy planning his campaign. He's going to go to Anambra State at some point.
No. You see, why wouldn't he go and comfort those who are mourning?
Oh, they will go
because I don't think it's relevant to his role.
That's the point. So, Mazi Obasi has nailed it. Yeah. He has no atom of compassion.
It's not
he lacks the milk of compassion.
He told you when he won that there is a certain amount of people that voted for him.
Let me just put this out there, because we talked about this in one of our earliest programs, and that is the concept of how people live and relate with each other. We, I would say, all of Southeast Nigeria, actually, the former Eastern region, it is rare for you to see kingdoms. So regardless of who has done what, I would say the greatest cohesiveness as a big group in Igbo would be the Arab, the Arab Chukwu and that spread across the yes. But if you go to the rest of Igbo, it is really small village family groups. Umunna.
Yes.
That is the basis of Igbo, and it is the same in Cross River. It is the same in Delta. It is the same in
Rogoja area.
Yes, yes. Now, also in many parts of the Middle Belt,
Yes.
the same holds true. The Yorubas had kingdoms,
Yes.
but even within their kingdoms, there is also close family ties.
Yes.
And yes, you have Obas, and Obas are great, but I do not see that they rule Yoruba land in exactly the same way the kingdoms in northern Nigeria have ruled.
Yeah, the Emir.
The Emir.
The Emirates, yes.
Yeah, because I don't know if it is also the influence of Islam, but you have to accept that there is a disdain for the commoner in northern Nigeria, and I'm talking about northern Nigerians of northern Nigerian descent.
Yes.
If you look at Aminu Kanu and what he fought for,
He
all
fought for
of
the
his life.
Talakawas. No, he fought for the Talakawas because there's a Talakawa class and there is the ruling class. So the Fulanese, who are the descendants of Usman Danfodio, are the ones who run the Emirates.
The reason I bring this up today is you are expecting your president to feel something. Thank you.
He doesn't have it. He doesn't have it. But you see, but so long as the vice president continues to apologize for him, continues to hold brief for him, and shows up to placate people on his behalf, he is not only aiding but also complicit. No,
Yes.
complicit.
That's the right word.
Yes,
He's complicit.
Yes.
You know, because
You
as a
cannot-
Christian,
Yes.
he cannot tell me. We've not seen his rage, his outrage.
He's a pastor.
No.
Not just a Christian.
Yes.
Not just a Christian. He's an ordained minister.
No, and the congregation, the denomination that he represents, he's part of, brought in Buhari, and inside and the GO prayed over him.
Okay, that's okay.
No, that's fine. He was welcomed into the church. He was celebrated inside the church.
And now he is destroying the church.
And
in the Middle Belt.
Not only destroying the church, but killing Christians, targeting Christians. And he has not, the vice president, you show up and you apologize and you tell Christians to be praying and fasting. Meanwhile, your boss, who has the lever of power, you can't get him to use that power. Then you're waiting for maybe the day you be the acting president.
Well,
if this is all you wait for, you resign. There comes a time.
He doesn't need to resign.
No.
Guys,
Africans
voting in
don't
November.
resign.
You're voting in November. He's not resigning. You know that. No.
Well,
Do what you have to.
So, okay.
No,
We are running out of time.
It comes
Okay.
a time. It comes a time in a man's life.
He's
Where-
asking himself the question.
That's right.
You go ahead.
What am I doing here? Am I effective? Am I being taken advantage of? What are my core beliefs? If things are not going the way, I cannot stay and say, okay, anyway, it will be good tomorrow, it will be good. No. That time has passed. That time has passed because you will be held accountable. That is when Esther stood up and went to the king and said, if I die, I die. And then, that's why if I perish, I perish. Because I'm going in to make this request, and the request was clear. Say, give my people the opportunity to defend themselves.
That's all. That's how I.
That's all Esther asked for.
Because-
So each time he will ask us to that, that we should look at the Esther model. Esther was asking the king because the decree has already gone out The king cannot
He
retrieve
can't
it.
retrieve it,
The
right?
death sentence has been passed on Christians in Nigeria. All Osibanjo should tell the king is, let my
Allow the
people to defend themselves.
And in that sense, I want to point out, yes, we're talking about 2019. The process of defending yourself is to first of all secure yourself. You cannot defend yourself if the leader of your people is already a saboteur. Then you are wasting your time. That's why Oshu's, what is it?
Ekiti and
Oshu have shown you what 2019 holds in turn for you. Specifically for Ndi Igbo. Specifically for Ndi Igbo. IPOB, you are the most organized group today, even though you have been proscribed.
And they have proscribed the
prescriber.
Yeah, well, so,
no,
well, I think you're saying that because they're grassroots organizations.
They are the grassroots.
Getting results.
They are the grassroots.
But
no, they say
you cannot walk away from this process. We keep saying this.
No, the point. Maybe someday we'll have a discussion about the Igbo nationalistic movement. You see, because the only way you can secure yourself is by participation. No, only 1
minute and you have 30 seconds, you have 30 seconds. Usually we talk about what are we doing better, what should we start doing, what should we let go. 30 seconds.
Opportunity. What should we be doing? Looking at sustainable development, using institutions like the African Development Bank.
Creating a fertile soil or a conducive environment for these institutions to thrive. Therefore, cleaning out the rotten politicians that infest Africa.
So for those who are in Nigeria, and maybe in some other parts of Nigeria, who are busy trying to live their lives, trying to secure their lives, you may not be in the best position to start thinking about African Development Bank. But if you're not running for your life, but for those of us who are in the diaspora, going to all these things, spending our money and lavishing our money on useless occasions, some of them useless, we have an opportunity to do something that is going to be a legacy that's going to last beyond. We want to reach generations, partnering with Africa. All right, in Dubai,
I try to village.
What else can a man do?
You finish, right?
Your